Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles, and it's a slightly shorter than average video today because I'm basically winding down for the weekend, and I actually have a number of other projects on the go at the moment that are taking up a bit more than their fair share of my time. And no, I'm not talking about Fallout 4, although that has been occupying a lot of my time of late, but I haven't actually gotten to play Fallout 4 in 2 days now, due to these other projects that have been occupying a lot of my time, but you'll be seeing the fruits of that labour coming up in the next couple of weeks. Well, anyway, today I'm going to be taking up the challenge that so many of you have thrown at my feet over the course of the last few months. Jingles, you're always making fun of battleship drivers. I'm not. I'm always making fun of idiots. There is a difference. Why don't you play a battleship yourself? Well, okay, but the only battleships I have are premium battleships. Why do you only have premium battleships, Jingles? Well, I just don't like battleships very much. How do you know you don't like battleships, Jingles? You never play the damn things. Au contraire, Blackadder. I have actually played battleships up to and including Tier 7 in both the American and Japanese lines. I played enough on the beta test servers before the game went live to know that battleships are just not my thing. I'm much more fond of cruisers and destroyers, which is why when the game went live I didn't bother researching any of the battleships, and instead I'm focusing on the cruisers and destroyers because those are what I enjoy playing. And the reason I enjoy playing them isn't because I was no good in battleships. I wasn't. I was better than average in battleships. Unfortunately, the problem is, if you make a mistake, and battleship drivers are not the only people who make mistakes in World of Warships, but the consequences of making a mistake in a battleship are so much more severe than if you make a mistake in a destroyer or a cruiser. Let's say, for example, you steam off down one end of the map and your entire team lemming trains down the other end of the map. You're completely alone, you sail around an island, and there are 5 enemy ships coming the other way. If you're in a destroyer, you turn around. If you've been spotted, and there's no guarantee you will have been spotted, you drop smoke and you just get out of there. You will almost certainly survive, unless you do something really stupid, like attack them. And it happens. If you're in a cruiser, you still have the speed and maneuverability to be able to turn around and get the hell out of there, while manoeuvring to avoid fire, and put some return fire down to attempt to discourage them from following you. If you're in a battleship, you basically have to stand and fight, and you're going to die. On a similar note, if you're not really paying attention to what's going on around you, maybe you're focusing your fire down on one ship in particular at the expense of everything else that's going on around you, or you're just not paying attention in general, not watching the map, and so on and so on, and you suddenly hear the torpedo warning alarm go off. If you're in any destroyer, and most of the cruisers, you're manoeuvrable enough that you can probably, providing you react quickly enough and turn in the right direction, you can probably avoid all or most of the torpedoes that have been fired at you. If you're in a battleship, it's already too late. You're too big a target, and you're just too slow to turn. The consequences of making bad decisions or just not paying attention to what's going on around you are so much more severe if you're in a battleship than any other class of ships in World of Warships. And that's why I just gave up on battleships when the game went live. Because the sad fact is that if you play a battleship in World of Warships, you just have to be better than if you were playing in a cruiser or a destroyer. Because you get punished for making mistakes in battleships that you can get away with in, well, anything else. Nevertheless, every now and then I do feel like something a little different. So I took the Ishizuchi out for a spin. This is the Japanese premium Tier 4 battleship. It's one of 5 Tier 4 battleships in the game. The Miyogi and the Wyoming are the 2 regular battleships, and there are also now 3 premium Tier 4 battleships. The Ishizuchi, which you can see here, and also the Imperator Nikolai, the new Soviet, or to be more accurate, Russian Tier 4 premium battleship, and then the Arkansas Beta, which was the gift for people who participated in the open beta test. And I do actually quite like the Ishizuchi, and I think the reason why I like the Ishizuchi in a way that I don't really like any of the others is because it is the fastest of any of the Tier 4 battleships. This thing has a top speed of just over 27 knots, which is pretty impressive for a battleship. In fact, it's faster than some of the Tier 3 cruisers. And that kind of speed gives you options that you just don't have in the Imperator Nikolai, the Miyogi, the Arkansas Beta, or the Wyoming. Going back to the earlier examples that I gave you, let's say you're in the Ishizuchi and you sail off down one end of the map completely by yourself as the rest of the team all lemming train in the other direction because, you know, you're an idiot. and you sail around the corner of an island and you find 5 St. Louis class cruisers coming the other way. If you're in any other battleship, you're going to die. There's no question about it. You are going to die. You are not fast enough to turn around and get the hell out of there. And you just don't have the firepower to deal with that many guns shooting at you at once. You're going to be burning from one end to the other, and you're going to die. You might take some of them with you, but you are going to die, and then you're going to rage at your team for not supporting you. Because that's what they do, isn't it? Well, if you're in the Ishizuchi, you can turn around and run away. You're faster than them. And most of your guns fire backwards. So you'll probably sink a couple of them while you're doing it. Yes, you'll take damage, but battleships have the ability to repair their health. The important factor here is that you do have the option of turning around and beating it the hell out of there, because the Ishizuchi has the speed that the other battleships don't. It doesn't have the firepower, though. That's the downside of this ship. It's easily got the worst firepower of any of the Tier 4 battleships. It also isn't as well armoured. That's why it's faster. It's also the sneakiest, at least until you fire your guns, which only have a range of 12.9 kilometers, but once again, it's got the speed to get itself within firing range, and if it finds it's bitten off more than it can chew, it's also got the speed to get back out of firing range once again. So, in preparation for doing this video, I thought I'll just quickly jump into World of Warships, fire up the Ishizuchi and have a quick co-op battle, just to get something that looks pretty to run in the background, while I'm talking about the ship in particular, and battleships in general. And this is the actual co-op battle footage, and it turned out to be one hell of a game. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to show you this co-op battle, because there are some very, very valuable lessons to be learned from what happened during this battle. And it's not something I've ever covered before, and I don't think I've ever seen anybody else covering it. And it's all about the armour on the battleship, because it's not just the big guns that make battleships different from everything else in World of Warships. They also have a lot more armour. And this particular engagement with this enemy battleship, we both pretty much started on full health. He died, and I took barely a scratch. And it's all down to effective use of armour. And here is that co-op battle. First target spotted, enemy destroyer. I'm not going to fire these 305mm guns at a destroyer at that range. He's a small target, he's popping in and out of view. I'd probably miss, and even if I did hit, it would do minimal damage because I've got armour piercing loaded. Then a much more inviting target pops up as he starts shooting at me, the Japanese Tier 4 cruiser, the Kuma. He's a much, much better target for a battleship's main battery guns. All 10 barrels fired, and yeah, that's what we're talking about. That is the primary reason why people sail battleships in World of Warships. It's getting those big old citadel penetrations with the main battery guns. Now, in case you didn't know, and it's surprising how many people still ask this question, they don't know exactly what the citadel of a ship is. The citadel is the part of the ship that has the most protection, and it has the most protection because it contains all the parts that don't react very well at all to getting shot at, the magazines, the engine spaces. So it's typically located right in the centre of the ship, starting underneath the gun turrets, because that's where the magazines are, and extending all the way back to the rear gun turrets. If you can get a penetrating hit there with armour piercing, you're going to do a lot of damage. You'll note, by the way, that I have slowed down here, and I've slowed down because I'm not stupid. There you go. Torpedoes in the water. Japanese cruiser, well inside torpedo range, broadside on. Don't hang around and wait until you see the torpedo traces in the water, because if you do, it's too late, you're going to take some hits. It's a Japanese cruiser, he's broadside on, he's going to have launched torpedoes, and all I had to do was slow down to 3/4 speed. Easy. And this is something that battleship drivers absolutely love. Cruisers that sail broadside onto them, so they can get all of their guns firing straight into the side of the ship and get the maximum number of citadel penetrations. Sailing broadside onto a battleship? That's a paddling. So, okay, that's how you do damage when you're in a battleship. But take every possible opportunity to fire into the flat side of any ships that show the side to you. But none of this is news. You see this in just about every battleship replay that anybody ever put up on YouTube. It's how the battleships score the big damage numbers with the main battery guns by getting those citadel penetrations into people who insist on showing the broad side of the ship to them. None of this is news. How do you actually go about avoiding damage in a battleship? And I'm not talking about torpedo avoidance. That should be obvious. If there's something that's going to be firing torpedoes at you in torpedo range and you continue sailing the same course and speed, you get torpedoed, it's your own fault. Simple as that. How about that armour? Well, after I've finished shooting at this St. Louis, we're going to give you an example. Have a look at the map, by the way. This is me not paying attention. There's an enemy battleship right in front of me, and I haven't seen him. He has actually already fired at me and missed. Did you just see him? I wasn't paying attention. You can see him on the map, and there we go. Now he hits me, I take a bit of damage, and I finally realise I'm sailing straight towards an enemy battleship. So he's managed to score the first blood. It's a South Carolina. Not a particularly good ship, and I am a tier higher than him, so I do start off with more health than he does. But he's on full health before I can start firing at him, and he's already fired at me 4 times and scored some damage. And then he does something quite surprising. He actually turns to face towards me. I fully expected, given that this is an AI battleship, I fully expected him to continue sailing broadside on to me so he could fire all of his guns at my ship, but he doesn't do that. The AI is actually smarter than that. I can no longer score a citadel penetration against this guy. In order to hit his citadel, I've got to get through about 50 feet of ship. If I was to shoot into the side of his ship here, at that angle, my armor piercing would just bounce right off. So instead, I have to, and this is not ideal, fire my armor piercing into his superstructure. But if you have a look at the ship indicator down there in the compass in the bottom left corner of the screen, you'll see that I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm resisting the urge to turn my ship broadside on in order to fire all of my 305mm guns at him, because that's going to expose the citadel of the ship and the flattest side of the armor, and he is going to be able to score citadel penetrations on me, and I'm just not going to give him the chance, in exactly the same way that he is doing to me. Our secondary batteries are now lighting each other up. I've turned the ship just enough, and not an inch more, to get my 3 rear gun turrets firing at him, and once they've fired, I turn the ship back in again to deny him the chance of scoring a citadel penetration. And now we're so close that neither of us can actually depress our gun barrels far enough to hit the side of the ship. So again, we're blazing away into each other's superstructures. A lot of the damage that's being exchanged here is actually coming from the secondary gun batteries. We've managed to set each other on fire just from the secondary gun battery fire. He is also, by the way, coming under attack, as you can see there from the St. Louis, but he arrived kind of late to the party, and he's only just gotten in range. The St. Louis didn't actually do a lot of damage to this guy. This was all me. Well, it wasn't all me, but it was mostly me. And my rear gun turrets, because I started turning them long before I needed to actually fire them, are now pounding this guy into submission. The South Carolina lost all of his 31,700 health, and I took 4,000 damage. The Ishizuchi is the least well-armoured of the Tier 4 battleships, but angling the armour, not exposing the side of the ship any more than you have to, meant that I basically came out of that fight with barely a scratch. But as the great Han Solo himself once said, good against remotes, that's one thing. Good against the living, that's different. So here's that random battle I promised you. Rule number 1 in a battleship in World of Warships: never, ever, ever go anywhere alone, if you can possibly avoid it. If the entire team are doing a lemming train down one flank, leaving 2 or 3 or even more of the capture flag points completely open to occupation by the enemy, and you're sitting there chewing your keyboard in frustration thinking, well, somebody's going to go that way. Yeah, it's not you, right? Not if you're in a battleship. Screw them. Join the lemming train. Battleships need support. If you're in a destroyer, you can do that. I've had games where that exact situation has developed. The entire team have buggered off down one side of the map, and I've just looked at the map and thought, oh, great. Oh, well, it's a tough job, but, you know, somebody's got to do it. And I've taken my destroyer down the other end of the map and single-handedly held off 3, 4, 5 or more enemy ships. Couldn't sink them, but I could make them think twice about pushing down that flank, knowing that there were torpedoes, if you're in a Japanese destroyer, or undetected gunfire, if you're in an American or a Soviet destroyer, for example, just constantly harassing them and making them think twice about pushing down that flank. In a destroyer, if you're any good, you can do that. Not so much in a battleship. The first time you know there are enemy ships coming down that flank is when you're already burning. So, just no. Battleships, they love company. Misery loves company. If your entire team are making a mistake, it's better that you all make the mistake together. So in this match, I'm sticking together with the majority of the team. Everybody steaming off quite happily in this direction. And we're going to run into the majority of the enemy team as well. So it's not going to be a one-sided fight at all. We've got a couple of ships that have headed off to the north. Most of us are heading off to the west. I could have joined those ships that have headed off to the north as well. And probably still had a decent match, but there wouldn't have been as much to shoot at. And I like doing damage. I mean, who doesn't? So instead, I'm heading off to the west. Now, this is not ideal battleship territory. There are so many islands around here that there's just concealment and opportunities for destroyer ambushes all over the place. So I've got my eyes on a swivel here. I'm paying attention to the map. I'm looking to see where those destroyers get spotted. Paying attention to the map is going to be my early warning indicator that there are torpedoes likely to be coming around the corner of the next island I sail around. The rest of the team, there's enough ships up ahead that they're probably going to detect these enemy destroyers long before I do. So right now the map is my torpedo early warning system. Right now I'm still sailing at full speed, but that's going to change very, very soon. I've just fired my guns, and I want to give my guns a chance to reload before I pop back into view range around the other side of this island. And also, I don't really want to get any closer to, there you go, one enemy destroyer. And yeah, there's another one. So I'm slowing down now. I want to give my guns a chance to reload. I don't want to get any closer to these destroyers or torpedo-armed cruisers than is absolutely necessary. And if my spider sense does go off and I do think somebody's fired torpedoes at me, I've got the option of either slowing down or speeding up in order to avoid the torpedoes. Whichever is best given the situation at the time. Enemy Clemson up ahead has managed to get some torpedoes away, and I think he's about to take one of our destroyers out. So I'm focusing my secondary gun batteries on him in advance, while I'm not being rushed and I actually have the leisure to do it, but yeah, he got taken out long before my secondary batteries could get within range. We've got a friendly Kuma up there who, yeah, he's just been taken out, but again, they've managed to knock out another destroyer. So, as far as I'm concerned, speaking as a battleship driver in this match, even though the scores are completely even, and in fact the enemy team are about to sink another one and go ahead 1 kill, from my personal perspective as a battleship driver in this match, we're winning. Because the enemy team are down 2 destroyers, so that's 2 less destroyers than I have to worry about. And there's one of them hightailing it out of there. But anyway, now time to get serious. Japanese tier 4 cruiser, the Kuma, and he of course has torpedoes. Now he's coming under fire, and in fact he's getting far too far ahead of himself here. He's got 2 ships shooting at him, and very shortly I'm going to be shooting at them. I've slowed right down to half speed now, and I'm turning the ship so I can get all of these gun barrels pointing at him with armor piercing loaded right as he comes around this corner and before he can get any torpedoes in the water against me. And come on, aim at the waterline. That's what we're talking about. Oh yeah. Now, did he get torpedoes away against me? I don't think so, but let's not take any chances. I start speeding up and I turn. It's best to just not take any chances, and I don't think he did actually manage to get some torpedoes away. Oh, and I managed to score an armor piercing hit on that Wakataki, which was great news. I do like doing damage to destroyers when I'm in a battleship because they're absolute little bastards. Anyway, enemy St. Louis. The St. Louis is a very, very frustrating target to shoot at if you're in a battleship, despite the fact that I'm never going to have a better chance of scoring a citadel penetration than this. Broadside of the ship. Well, I'm doing a good amount of damage, but no citadel penetrations. I'll explain why in a moment. Torpedoes in the water. Now, I didn't react to it until the torpedo warning alarm went off. Yes, I know, bad. But I slow down, and I start turning in towards them. And I thought for a second there I was going to be able to avoid all of them. But as it was, that wasn't bad at all. Now, meanwhile, that St. Louis, he's coming under fire from a whole bunch of different ships. And it's the concentration of fire that's going to take him out. Nobody's doing really big damage to him. The thing about the St. Louis is it's a protected cruiser. It's not that heavily armoured. But it's the placement of the coal bunkers in the ship that is what makes this thing so tough and able to withstand so much punishment when other ships would have the citadel penetrated and just blow up in a couple of hits. Once you get through that citadel armour, all of the sides of the St. Louis are basically coal bunkers. So you get through the citadel armour and you also have to get through 10 feet of coal before you reach the engine rooms of the ship with your armour-piercing shells. I don't know for certain, but I suspect, yep, more torpedoes, these are going to be easy to avoid. I don't know that for certain, but I do suspect that is the way that the St. Louis is in fact modelled, which is kind of disappointing. It's as if Wargaming have gone halfway but no further, because you'd expect that once you get through that citadel armour and bury a shot into the coal bunkers, that it would just burst into flames, but it doesn't seem to be the case. Anyway, what we got to shoot at next? Oh, we've spotted an enemy carrier. That's jolly nice, isn't it? And not just an enemy carrier, that's a lot of ships, including some of the enemy battleships. Okay, well, carriers launching torpedo bombers. I'm up to full speed. Carrier's in range, may as well shoot him. Conventional wisdom dictates that if you're shooting at a carrier, you fire high explosive in order to set his flight deck on fire and prevent him from launching aircraft. But if you're in a battleship and you've got armor piercing loaded, hell, fire armor piercing. You'll score citadel penetrations and you'll sink him a hell of a lot faster. Particularly if you've got somebody else firing high explosive at him and setting him on fire for you. Which is what I thought this Kuma up ahead of me was going to do, but he's just managed to get himself sunk by the carrier's torpedo bombers, which is a bit of a bummer, so I'm going to have to shoot at the carrier. And I'd far rather be shooting at these enemy cruisers, but this guy needs sinking, so shots out. Oh, here comes a friendly destroyer. Maybe the friendly destroyer will assist me in sinking this carrier. Bingo! There you go, citadel penetration. But not enough to sink him. He's hanging on to life by a thread. Come on, destroyer. Carrier's in range. He's an easy kill. Get some high explosive into him. I want to sink this St. Louis. But no, the destroyer who's with me, he's going for the enemy destroyer, which, yeah, okay, I suppose that's fair enough. Well, like it or not, I'm going to have to sink this carrier for myself. So, shots out, and that's going to be enough to put him out of his misery. And enemy destroyer has launched torpedoes. And I do kind of screw this up. Kill the carrier, see the torpedoes, start slowing. Wrong thing to do. Immediately start speeding up again, but it's too late. I've already lost too much speed. If I'd stayed going at full speed, I would have been able to dodge all of those torpedoes. As it is, I took one. But yeah, I can take one torpedo hit. That's not a problem. I'm in a battleship. I can repair my health. Meanwhile, this friendly Clemson with me is doing his best to finish off that Wakataki, but he's being shot at by St. Louis, and yeah, he's down. So I'm going to have to kill the destroyer myself as well. Hurrah! Another kill. There was 3 of us steamed up here, by the way, against 4 enemies, and now I'm the only one left. But I've managed to kill 2 of them, with some assistance, at least some assistance from the Clemson there. He did do a lot of damage to the Wakataki. The Kuma, no, not so much. So, anyway, 2 St. Louis's remaining for me to deal with. Unfortunately, a number of bad things are happening right now. First of all, you might notice I've had my engine knocked out, so I'm now just sitting dead in the water and taking a pounding from this guy. And secondly, he's hugging the map border, isn't he? And this was recorded before the change to the game mechanics that meant that the game now correctly calculates the trajectory of shots fired at targets who are in the map border, and they also lose 75% of their engine power to make them even easier to hit when they're exploiting the border like this. So I'm not really able to score any good hits on this guy. But I have at least managed to get my engine back up and running, which is kind of, well, was the torpedo warning going off? Yes, it was. There they are. Friendly torpedoes. That's a friendly Yumikaze class destroyer, the Japanese Tier 2. His torpedoes either have a 5 or 8 kilometer range, and he is firing his torpedoes at a St. Louis who is already outside of his range and sailing even further outside of his range. And in fact, if my damage control ability had come off cooldown 10 seconds earlier, he would have torpedoed me. So, but yeah, it's only a Tier 2 destroyer. He's probably very, very new to the game, but it does pay to know the range of your torpedoes and never, ever fire them ahead of a friendly ship. And, you know, actually, in the spirit of complete fairness, I don't think this St. Louis was deliberately exploiting the border here. I think he was just trying to get the hell away while still getting as many of his guns pointing at me as possible. So, yeah, fair enough. But anyway, I'm getting sick and tired of shooting at him. Whether he was deliberately doing it or not is irrelevant. It was happening. It was making it nearly impossible for me to score a good hit on him. So instead, I'm going to kill this guy because he's AFK. And I can. So, hooray! Another kill. And you can actually score citadel penetrations on St. Louis's. You just have to do them at sufficient range that your shots come in from above. It's called plunging fire. So the shots can actually penetrate the deck and get straight into that citadel without having to go through 10 feet of coal bunker on the way. So, 1 St. Louis left. Both teams are now starting to cap. And, yeah, we're being completely fair, my targeting of this St. Louis wasn't the greatest. I mean, I am scoring some hits, but I'm not getting any real big damage done, and that's because of my shooting. If you look, let's wait until I zoom in and aim at him again. I'm not really leading the shots enough. And some of the shots are landing on target, but that's more down to the dispersion of the shells than any real great aiming on my behalf. I should be elevating the gun barrels just a little bit more because they're mostly actually falling short. And that's going to cost me an almost certain kill, because at this kind of range your shots are coming in from almost directly above, and if I just elevated the gun sights a little bit more, just raise the sights, is that destroyer still firing torpedoes? You're not going to hit him at that... Oh, never mind. Here, watch this. There, you see that? That shot right into the quarterdeck of the ship. In fact, I think we're going to get another one here as well. There. If I'd raised the sights slightly more, he'd be dead. That would have been a citadel penetration. And another one. These shots are all landing on the quarterdeck of that ship. And that's not the citadel. The quarterdeck is the bit at the back of the ship. And the only thing I can knock out there is, well, I can do some damage, and I can knock out his steering. If I'd raised the sights just a fraction, those shots would have gone straight between the funnels and citadeled him. And what the hell am I doing? Not paying attention to where I'm going, in much the same way that he did earlier, and ran it at the map border. And both teams are about to cap. And he's going to get away, thanks to my terrible shooting. Look at the health he's on. And this match is going to be a draw. And when it's a draw, everybody's a loser. Bummer. Oh well, never mind. I think I pretty much did everything I could in that match, notwithstanding my terrible shooting at the St. Louis at the end of that game. Which I have noticed is actually a bit of a problem for me. I consistently seem to not do too well when somebody's sailing directly away from me. I don't really have that problem when they're sailing towards me, which is weird. But anyway, at least I know it's an issue and I can take steps to do something about it in future. Anyway, there you go. Today's video. Me in a battleship at last. I'm pretty sure that's the first time I've actually sailed a battleship, other than when I was testing premium ships for wargaming, since World of Warships went live. But don't worry, I'm not going to make a habit out of it. I really don't like battleships that much. Ishizuchi notwithstanding, this is actually a pretty good ship, and I do actually quite like it. So I might still dabble in battleship gameplay down here at Tier 4 with my premiums, the Ishizuchi, the Imperator Nikolai, which is a pretty good ship as well. Not such a fan of the Arkansas Beta, but yeah, anyway. That's it for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and that's it for this week. I'm taking my well-earned 1 day a week off now, and I'll see you on Monday for next week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. As always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.